March 29th, 1987. First show back. Dean Martin walked out on stage, and the audience could immediately tell something was different. He wasn't carrying his trademark glass of scotch. He wasn't smiling. He looked 20 years older than he did 2 weeks ago. The band started the opening number. Dean was supposed to sing, but instead he put up his hand, stopping them. "Wait," he said into the microphone, his voice cracking. The crowd went silent. "Before we start, I need to tell you something." What Dean Martin said in the next 4 minutes wasn't written, it wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't the Dean anyone knew. And by the time he finished, there wasn't a single person in that casino who wasn't crying, including the security guards, including the dealers at the tables, including Dean himself, for the first time since his son died. Dean's decision to perform despite warnings. The Bally's casino in Las Vegas was at full capacity that night, 2,400 seats, all filled. The management had debated whether to even allow Dean to perform. He buried his son 8 days ago. The casino manager, Richard Patterson, had told his staff that afternoon, "He's not ready. Nobody would be ready." But Dean had insisted. When Patterson called him at home to offer postponement, Dean's response was immediate. "I need to work, Richard. If I stay in this house one more day, I'll lose my mind." So they let him perform, but they prepared for the worst. Extra security was stationed backstage. A doctor was on standby. Dean's longtime friend and musical director, Kenneth Bloom, had been warned to watch Dean carefully and to end the show immediately if things went wrong. Nobody knew what to expect. Would Dean make jokes about death? Would he break down? Would he even be able to sing? The lights dimmed at 9:15 p.m. The crowd, dressed in their Saturday night finest, buzzed with anticipation, mixed with something else, morbid curiosity. They'd all read the newspapers. They all knew what had happened to Captain Dean Paul Martin, Jr., the golden-haired fighter pilot who'd crashed his F-4 Phantom into the San Bernardino Mountains on March 21, 1987. They knew Dean hadn't spoken publicly since the funeral. They knew Frank Sinatra had tried to get him to cancel. They knew this would either be the bravest performance in Vegas history or the most painful one to witness. The orchestra started playing the familiar opening bars. This was the moment when Dean would usually stumble out from the wings, pretending to be drunk, winking at the ladies, making everyone laugh before he even reached the microphone. But not tonight. Tonight, Dean walked slowly, deliberately. His signature tuxedo seemed to hang looser on his frame. His face, usually animated with that mischievous grin, was expressionless, empty. The crowd began to applaud, but it was hesitant applause, uncertain. They could see something was profoundly wrong. The moment Dean stopped the show. Dean reached the microphone stand in the center of the stage. The spotlight hit him full force, and then he just stood there. The orchestra kept playing the introduction to That's Amore, waiting for Dean to start singing, but he didn't sing. He raised his hand and the music stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. 2,400 people held their collective breath. "Wait," Dean said, his voice barely above a whisper but amplified through the sound system. The words seemed to catch in his throat. In the front row, Frank Sinatra sat forward in his seat, his hand instinctively reaching toward the stage as if ready to catch his friend if he fell. "Before we start," Dean continued, and everyone could hear his voice shaking, "I need to tell you something." The audience waited. Some people later said they could hear their own heartbeats in that silence. Dean looked down at his hands. He was gripping the microphone stand so hard his knuckles had turned white. 8 days ago, he began, and then stopped. He took a breath, started again. 8 days ago, I buried my son. The words hung in the air. Several women in the audience began crying immediately.
Captain Dean Paul Martin Jr., 35 years old, fighter pilot, California Air National Guard, the best man I ever knew. He paused, looking out over the crowd, but his eyes seemed to be looking at something far beyond them. A lot of you came here tonight expecting the same old Dean, the jokes, the drunk act, the silly songs. He shook his head slowly. I can't give you that Dean tonight. I don't know if that Dean exists anymore. Frank Sinatra was openly crying now, his shoulders shaking. See, that Dean had a son who was alive. That Dean could go home after a show and call his boy and talk about planes and flying in the future. That Dean could pretend that nothing really bad could ever happen because he was Dean Martin and bad things didn't happen to Dean Martin. He looked down at the stage floor. But that Dean was wrong. I need to tell you something. The silence in the casino was absolute. Even the slot machines in the distance seemed to have gone quiet. They found him on March 21st, he said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. In the mountains, my son, my Dino. They said the impact was instantaneous. They said he didn't suffer. They said a lot of things that were supposed to make me feel better. He looked back up at the audience. None of it made me feel better. A man in the third row put his head in his hands. His wife grabbed his arm, tears streaming down her face. At the funeral, Dean continued, everyone kept telling me, be strong, Dean. Your son would want you to be strong. You have to be strong for your family. So I was strong. I stood there at Arlington National Cemetery. I watched them fold that flag. I listened to them play taps, and I didn't cry, not once. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with something that sounded like shame. Everyone probably thought I was heartless. My ex-wife, she kept looking at me like something was wrong with me, like I was broken. And maybe I am, because I couldn't cry. I wanted to. God, I wanted to, but I couldn't. Dean's hand moved to his jacket pocket. The audience watched. Do you know why I couldn't cry? Because if I started crying, I'd have to admit he was really gone, and I wasn't ready to admit that. I'm still not ready to admit that.
The pilot wings that broke him. His hand pulled something small from his pocket. It was difficult to see from the audience what it was. 15 years ago, Dean said, his voice beginning to crack again. Dino gave me this. He held up what appeared to be a small metal object, a pin. It's his first pilot's wings from when he graduated flight school. He was so proud that day. 20 years old, standing there in his uniform, and he took these wings off his chest and he pinned them on me. Dean's voice broke completely now. He said, now you can fly too, Dad. The first tear rolled down Dean Martin's cheek. I've carried these wings in my pocket every single day for 15 years. Every show, every movie, every moment of my life. And Dino knew that. He'd see me before a show, and he'd tap my pocket and say, got your wings, old man? And I'd say, always, kid, always. Dean was openly sobbing now, his whole body shaking. Well, I've still got them, Dino, he said, looking up as if his son could hear him. I've still got your wings, but you're not here to ask me about them anymore. Frank Sinatra stood up from his seat, but Kenneth Bloom, the musical director, caught his eye and shook his head slightly. This was something Dean needed to do. I didn't want to come here tonight. Frank told me not to. My daughter told me not to. Everyone told me to take time off, to grieve, to heal. But here's the thing nobody understands. He looked directly at the audience now, his eyes red but fierce. I don't know how to heal from this. I don't know how to grieve something that's impossible. My son wasn't supposed to die before me. That's not how it works. Parents aren't supposed to bury their children. It's against every law of nature. It's wrong. It's all wrong.
His voice rose with each sentence, the pain pouring out of him like water from a broken dam. "And I came here tonight because I don't know what else to do," he shouted. "This is all I know. Standing on a stage and entertaining people is the only thing I've ever been good at. And if I can't do this, then what am I?" The crowd sat in stunned silence. This wasn't entertainment. This was a man falling apart in real time, and they were witnessing it. Dean took a shuddering breath, trying to compose himself. "So here's what I'm going to do," he said, his voice quieter now. "I'm going to sing tonight. I'm going to sing every song on that set list. And I'm probably going to forget some of the words because my brain doesn't work right anymore. And I'm probably going to cry through most of them because I can't seem to stop crying now that I've started." He looked down at the pilot's wings in his hand. "But I'm going to sing them for my son because he loved hearing me sing. Even when I'd mess up, even when I'd forget the words, he'd just smile that smile and say, 'You're still the best, Dad.'" Dean carefully pinned the small wings to his lapel. His hands were shaking so badly it took 3 attempts. "So if you came here tonight for the old Dean Martin, I'm sorry. He's not here anymore. He died on March 21st in the San Bernardino Mountains with his son. What you've got instead is just a father who misses his boy so much it feels like his heart is being ripped out of his chest every time he takes a breath." He turned to Kenneth Bloom and the orchestra. "Let's start with 'Everybody Loves Somebody.' It was Dino's favorite." The audience's unforgettable response. The orchestra began to play softly at first, giving Dean time to collect himself. When Dean began to sing, his voice was different. It wasn't the smooth, effortless voice that had charmed millions. It was rough, raw, broken, but it was real in a way his voice had never been real before. "Everybody loves somebody sometime. Everybody falls in love somehow. Something in your kiss just told me, my sometime is now." He got through the first verse without stopping, but tears continued to stream down his face. When he reached the chorus again, something unexpected happened. A man in the audience, a large man in a suit who looked like he'd seen his share of hardship, stood up and began to sing quietly, respectfully. Then his wife stood and joined him. Then the couple next to them. Within moments, the entire audience of 2,400 people was standing, singing along with Dean Martin. But they weren't singing loud. They weren't trying to be part of the show. They were singing like they were singing at a funeral, like they were singing a prayer. Dean saw what was happening, and he stopped singing. He just stood there listening to 2,400 people sing his son's favorite song. Kenneth Bloom kept the orchestra playing, tears running down his own face. When the song ended, there was no applause, just silence. And then, from somewhere in the back, someone started clapping slowly, the kind of solemn clapping you hear at a memorial service. The entire audience joined in, and Dean Martin stood there, his head bowed, accepting something he'd never received before at any of his performances. Not admiration, not entertainment, but empathy. When the applause finally died down, Dean looked up. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for letting me be human tonight." He performed for another 73 minutes that night. He forgot lyrics. He had to stop 3 times to compose himself. He did no jokes. He did no pratfalls. He didn't pretend to be drunk. He was just a father singing songs, trying to survive. Frank Sinatra later said it was the most powerful performance he'd ever witnessed in 50 years of show business. The casino manager, Richard Patterson, said that in all his years in Vegas, he'd never seen anything like it. people came in expecting a show. They left having experienced something sacred. After the final song, Dean didn't take a bow. He didn't wave to the crowd. He simply said, "God bless you all for being here tonight with me," and walked off stage. Backstage, Frank Sinatra was waiting. He grabbed Dean and held him as Dean finally completely broke down. The two men stood there, two legends who'd faced everything life could throw at them, and they cried together. "I can't do this anymore, Frank. I can't pretend everything's okay. I can't be that guy anymore." "Then don't be," Frank said. "Be this guy, the real guy, the guy who loved his son more than anything in the world."
The legacy that changed everything. Dean would perform for 18 more months after that night, but he was never the same. The swagger was gone. The jokes were fewer. The charm was replaced with something deeper: authenticity. His audiences changed too. People stopped coming to be entertained. They came to witness honesty, to see a man bearing his soul, to feel less alone in their own grief. Dean Martin performed his final show on March 7, 1989, almost exactly 2 years after Dino's death. He walked on stage that night and never performed again. When asked by a reporter why he retired, Dean's answer was simple: "I did what I came to do. I said goodbye to my son in the only way I knew how. Now it's time to go be with him." Dean Paul Martin's pilot wings remained pinned to his father's chest every single day until Dean Martin died on Christmas morning, 1995. They buried him with those wings still attached. And if you ask anyone who was in that Bally's casino on March 29, 1987, they'll tell you the same thing. They didn't just see a show that night. They saw a man's heartbreak in real time. And somehow, by breaking in front of them, Dean Martin gave them permission to break too. That's the power of vulnerability. That's the power of truth. And that's the untold story of the night Dean Martin stopped being an entertainer and became something far more important: a father who loved his son more than fame, more than applause, more than anything else in the world.